For people born, raised, and educated in Europe, a trip to Greece is less a journey of discovery and more of a tour of confrontation and affirmation of their heritage that had been a part of their upbringing. Our group is setting out on that tour with mixed expectations, since the country's magnificent past does not go hand in hand with the present political and economic realities. Acropolis in Athens tops our list as the most important ancient site in the Western world. Its first temples were built in Mycenaean era in homage to goddess Athena. Real architectural transformation came to Acropolis in 480 BC, when Pericles expanded the site into a marble city of temples. The most impressive, of course, is the Parthenon. Built of Pentelic marble, it was the largest Doric temple ever completed in Greece. Its roof was resting on 50 cleverly designed Doric columns. It served as a temple to Athena Parthenos, as well as an Athenian treasury. The sculptures of the pediments, the frieze, and the metopes were designed and supervised by Phidias himself. They were brightly colored and gilded. Now they are displayed in the Acropolis Museum. Across from Parthenon is the Erechtheion. No, it's not a sanctuary to erections, but sacred ground where Poseidon struck earth with his trident and where Athena planted an olive tree as a gift to Athenian people. The southern portico of the structure is supported by 6 female figures known as caryatids. Those on display here are plaster casts. The originals, except for one taken to Britain, are permanently housed in the Acropolis Museum. Northern porch consists of 6 Ionic columns. On the floor there are fissures supposedly left by Zeus' thunderbolt. The entry and exit from Acropolis leads to the stairs on the western side of the hill. The high pedestal, now empty, used to support the monument of Roman General Agrippa. This spot commands the view of the entire city of Athens. Another view of the city is through the columns of Propylaea, the monumental entrance to the Acropolis. At the foot of Acropolis rock, there is a beautifully restored Odeon of Herodes Atticus, which was built in 151 AD under the Roman rule. The venue you're presently looking at is a theater of Dionysus, world's oldest theater. It is on the southern slope of the Acropolis, and it dates back to the 6th century BC. The first structure was made of timber and held contests where goat-skin-clad men, encouraged by wine, sung and danced to the amusement of the masses. Real drama grew out of these contests and experienced its golden age in the 5th century BC, with dramas and comedies written by Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. In 342 BC, the theater was rebuilt in stone to accommodate 17,000 people. In the 2nd century BC, the reliefs supporting the stage were added, depicting the scenes from the life of Dionysus. In the area adjacent to the theater, ancient fragments of statuary and colonnade that were once a part of the structure are on display. Tired and a bit spaced out, we are awaiting lunch at the cafe close to the Acropolis Museum. Opened in 2009, the museum building is a cooperative effort of American architect Bernard Tschumi and Greek Michael Fotaris. It is designed to seemingly float along the ancient ruins, with Acropolis always visible as a context to all the masterpieces displayed inside. The collection puts emphasis on the 5th century BC, the zenith of Greece's artistic achievement. At the heart of ancient Athens was the Agora, located at the foot of the Acropolis hill. Agora was a lively, crowded center of political, administrative, commercial, and social activity. Archaeologists uncovered foundations of buildings where Senate met and from where government ruled. The best preserved structure in the Agora is the Temple of Hephaestus, god of fire and metal forging. Built in classical Doric style in the 5th century BC, it was designed by the same architect who worked on the Parthenon. His name was Iktinos. The Stoa of Attalos was built by King Attalos II in the 2nd century BC and was intended as a commercial center of the Agora. In the 1950s, it was reconstructed by the American School of Classical Studies. Today, the Stoa serves as the Agora Museum, where all the sculptures, architectural ornaments, and artifacts excavated in the Agora are on display. In the oldest part of Agora, the ruins of statuary and foundation of the Stoa of Zeus Eleutherius were uncovered. It was here that Socrates publicly laid out the principles of his philosophy. During Roman rule, the Agora was extended further north. One of the largest structures there is Hadrian's Library, erected in the 2nd century AD. In the late afternoon, when shadows were already growing long, we reached the ruins of the Temple of Olympian Zeus. Judging by its size, it was an Olympian undertaking which took 700 years to complete. The construction began in the 6th century BC, and it was finished by Emperor Hadrian in 131 AD. There were once 104 Corinthian columns supporting the roof, each 17 meters high. The remaining 15 still dwarf the few visitors walking around the vast open space. Among the ruins of ancient Athens, this small church of Holy Apostles stands in a direct view of the Acropolis. It was built in the early 10th century to commemorate the spot where St. Paul was teaching Christian doctrine in the Agora. Fragments of beautiful original frescoes and mosaics have been painstakingly preserved. Our exploration of ancient Greek culture was bound to end at the National Archaeological Museum, which houses the world's finest collection of Greek antiquities. Treasures from Neolithic era to Greek classical period are all here on display. The unique and comprehensive collection of pottery illustrates the evolution and variety of vessel-making techniques from 11th century BC to Hellenistic period. The illustrated vessels give us a glimpse into the life of ancient Greeks, the wars they fought, gods they worshipped, and even mythical beasts they imagined. The next four pictures are of frescoes from the Minoan culture, which flourished in the Bronze Age on many islands of the Aegean Sea. The frescoes come from the settlement of Akrotiri on an island of Santorini. Akrotiri was buried by a volcanic eruption 1600 years before the birth of Christ. These gold artifacts also date back to about 1500 years before Christ. They come from Mycenaean culture, which developed on the Peloponnesian Peninsula. In the city of Mycene, this gold funerary mask of King Agamemnon was found in the 19th century. Homer's Iliad puts him in command of united Greek armies in the Trojan War. And finally, here we have a small sample of ancient Greek sculpture, a discipline where Greeks achieved true excellence. Whether in marble or bronze, their works are incredibly detailed, expressive, and dynamic. Some are even very playful. Leaving the museum, we are ready to embrace Athens as they are today, beginning with Syntagma Square. Platea Syntagma, or Constitution Square, is presided over on the easterly side by the Greek Parliament, where every hour, in front of hundreds of tourists, this comic spectacle takes place. This is changing of the guard. No self-respecting country lets its soldiers out in public in their long underwear and pom-pom slippers to do stretching exercises in front of the House of Legislature. The antiques they go to wiping their shoes suggest that they might have stepped into a dog mess. While watching, you may want to count the tassels and pom-poms on each uniform. Sources say that those uniforms are based on actual attire worn by mountain fighters called klepts in the War of Independence. cruising through Athens of the 19th century, passing Old Parliament Building, National Library, and University of Athens. These parts of the city, on the other hand, remind us that it is also a modern European metropolis. The city of Athens, as well as whole Greece, are in crisis, economic and social crisis. The critical situation is mirrored in the invasion of street graffiti.
Just lift up your head and yell. Oh, mister, ring them bells. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-la-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da. Do-do-do-do. Run it up, 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 run it up.
Dilapidated buildings, and multitude of open street markets where almost everything is bought and sold. Here, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Monastiraki Flea Market is a place of thousands of small transactions where Greek economy still seems to function. Keychain or beer opener, anyone? Did I say beer? After hours of walking around the city, frosty local brew and a plate of Greek lamb was just what we needed. Moving on to desserts, which looked spectacular and tasted heavenly. Greeks were adventurers and sailors, and Aegean Sea was their backyard pool. Most of the islands in the Aegean are Greek territory, although Turkey rushed in the last century to claim a few. From the Greek island of Kos, the Turkish city of Bodrum is in plain view because it is only 2.5 miles away. Here is the narrowest waterway between Turkey and Greece. When approaching from the sea, the view of Kos Island is dominated by a medieval fortress. The culprits are the knights from the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. They simply forgot to return home after the Crusades. They captured the island, built the fortress using miscellaneous ancient debris that was easily available, and held the island until 1522, when it fell to the Turks. In its time, the castle was a formidable defensive structure. Inside the walls, the knights accumulated remains of ancient Greek buildings and statuary, and many times reused the fragments for their own needs. There are multiple prehistoric sites on the island because long before Christ was born, Greeks were settlers here. Ruins of temples, government buildings, and remains of mosaics in former private residences attract many visitors. Local islanders proudly tell stories of Hippocrates, the Greek physician known as a founder of medicine, who was a native of this island. After his death in 4th century BC, the Asclepian sanctuary, in other words, hospital and medical school, were built. Here, a group of tourists seems to be putting to use a well-preserved Roman Odeon, attempting to stage a review. And here, a brazen impostor tries to pass himself off as Apollo. Unfortunately, the hat gives him away. The capital of the island, the town of Kos, is laid back and open to visitor traffic just like it had been for centuries. Outdoor cafes, internet, and souvenir shops are everywhere you turn. But the colorful past of the island is always in the background. After Greek and Roman plethora of gods came early Byzantine Christians, then the Catholic Christian Knights of St. John, and finally, in the mid-16th century, Muslims arrived. This is now boarded up mosque of Ghazi Hassan Pasha. Ever restless, like Greek sailors, we are on the move again. Mythical island of Rhodos beckons, only a short distance away from Kos. The Colossus of Rhodos was a bronze statue of Helios that straddled the entrance to the port of Rhodos. It was 33 meters high, and warships could easily pass between its legs. It had a relatively short lifespan, however. Built in 292 BC, it was toppled by an earthquake in 226. We are setting out to discover Rhodos, and we are already amazed by its topography set against the Mediterranean blue. Here, out of the many places we've seen, the layers of history are piled upon one another and coexist to make a unique effect. We will be climbing the Acropolis of Lindus, 116 meters high rock. Byzantine fortifications on the outside encircle 2nd century BC Acropolis, built in Doric style and beautifully preserved. Also partially reconstructed, temple to Athena from 4th century BC and a Byzantine church. The most remarkable, of course, is the location. On a high perpendicular rock with 180-degree views of blue sky melting into the Mediterranean blue. The silhouette of Vitek encapsulates the feeling one has in a place like this. Yes, it is possible to fly. The views are of sugar cube houses, blazing sun, and aquamarine backdrop of the sea. Our climb had led us through a village of Lindos. It is a maze of alleys packed with boutiques, souvenir shops, quaint cafes, and restaurants. Dodging a procession of donkeys, we find a courtyard leading to a small Byzantine church of the Holy Virgin. Every inch of space here is covered with frescoes. The ceilings are low, and you can spend hours examining every detail. Guess who is responsible for building this fortress? Our familiar culprits, the Knights of St. John from Jerusalem. The walls of the castle are 12 meters thick. Kolakiot is the part of Old Town Rhodes where the knights used to live in medieval times and rule the island. In Kolakiot, narrow cobblestone streets are hauntingly romantic. Black-clad, kerchiefed old women still lurk in some doorways. Around every corner, there are ruins from a different era. Here medieval, here Roman and Byzantine. Every other building houses a museum of some sort. Life is just too short. While the Knights' Quarter contains most of historical sites and museums, Hora, the Turkish part of the old town, is a commercial section with shops and restaurants. Window shopping goes hand in hand with looking for a restaurant. It is that time of the day, lunchtime. Looking good, and the food is exotic enough, so here we go. It looks like they also have internet and delicious lunch. Afternoon, we are leaving Rhodes. There are clouds gathering on the horizon. The old town and the castle walls, reflecting the setting sun, look like a picture from the book of fairy tales. And look, even a rainbow! It is a magical place after all. Crete could easily be named the Paradise Island. White beaches, blue water, thriving vineyards, breathtaking landscape, and ancient history. Crete is most famous for being the cradle of Europe's first advanced civilization, the Minoans, named after their ruler, mythical King Minos. His grand palace at Knossos, about 3 miles from today's capital of Crete, Heraklion, is still being excavated, while some sections have already been beautifully restored. Minoan civilization appeared on Crete 3,000 years before Christ's birth and vanished 1,500 years later. Archaeologists speculate that it could have been due to a tsunami generated by a massive volcanic eruption on Santorini. Some amazing frescoes and other artifacts uncovered at Knossos have been moved for preservation purposes to the Archaeological Museum in Heraklion. The ones on display here are copies. In Heraklion, at the museum, we are astonished by the skill and imagination of Minoan artists and craftsmen from civilization of 4,000 years ago. Later that afternoon, over drinks, we discuss what it means to be civilized, while heavy clouds gather on the horizon again. At the southernmost tip of Peloponnesian Peninsula, there is a rock island where sheer cliffs rise hundreds of meters from the sea. It was once attached to the mainland, but the earthquake in 375 AD severed this connection. Now a bus takes tourists like us across the man-made causeway to the rock island called Monemvasia, and the fortress and medieval village that cling to its walls. The colorful history of the village between 6th and 13th century has Byzantine Christians, Venetians, marauding French crusaders, and Turks all invading the island and leaving traces of their presence. On the village main square, the 13th century Church of Christ in Chains is beautifully renovated. Across the square, another church of Agios Pavlos, built in 956, is an example of Roman architecture. The narrow cobbled streets, underground passages, small window openings, romantic history, and magnificent views draw thousands of tourists here every summer. During the remaining seasons, the tourist traffic subsides, and there are only 7 permanent residents on the island. In the Aegean Sea, at the southern edge of the Cycladic archipelago, lies an island of Santorini, which captures your imagination long before you get there. Like the majority of islands in the Aegean Sea, Santorini, or Thera, is a volcanic island. Some 3,600 years ago, when the island was round, the volcano blew its top. What's left of the island today is its eastern crescent, sitting at the edge of a giant cauldron filled with cerulean blue water. At the foot of the rock, soaring 900 feet from the sea-drowned caldera, there is a small landing pier. From here, a steep, winding path leads up either on foot or on a donkey to the town of Pyrgos. We chose a ride in a gondola built by Austrians. No one in their right mind would trust the Greeks with this sort of thing. This is the southern part of Fira, the capital of the island. Our gentlemen know of a local brewery they are very keen to visit, but ladies opt for the Catholic Cathedral of St. John. Cathedral's wonderfully ornate clock tower overlooks the town. The dome and the interior are lilac blue and look like they have been freshly painted. It turns out the cathedral has been recently renovated after it suffered damage in a 1956 earthquake. On our way, we also stopped to see a small Orthodox church. Wide and aquamarine compact cuboid is perched on the top of the hill that has views of the Aegean on both sides of the island. This larger church is on the outskirts of Fira. The colors and the look of the buildings in this vicinity already give us a taste of things to come. Fira sits at the very edge of the caldera, layered with hotels, restaurants, and apartments that spill down the terraced hill towards the blue abyss. Some even have pools suspended halfway up to heaven. There are many doors that lead to nowhere, and views that go on forever. Behind this, there is a maze of narrow streets full of homes, shops, galleries, and even more bars and restaurants. From Fira, we're driving downhill to the very northern tip of the island. We are looking forward to lunch that will take place here, right at the edge of the water. Seafood is fresh right off this boat and is already waiting for us. Tables sit so close to the edge of the turquoise water that one unguarded move may topple them over and sink. Our food arrives, a mix of Greek salads and our favorites, frutti di mare. The local beer is served. It comes from the brewery our gentlemen wanted so much to visit. The eastern shore of Santorini is not nearly as densely populated as the caldera side. We passed just a few buildings on our way to the highest peak on the island. 18th century monastery dedicated to Prophet Elijah stands here overlooking the island. It holds an important collection of old icons and Bibles. The town of Akrotiri is one of the major archaeological sites in the Mediterranean. The excavations here began in 1967 and are all still ongoing. The people who built this remarkable town some 2,000 years before Christ were Minoans. You can recognize street layout, drainage system, and 3-story buildings that were somehow marvelously preserved. Curiously, there were no human remains found buried under the volcanic ash and debris that covered the town. Some believe that the people of Akrotiri fled on boats towards Crete before their island blew up in 1613 BC. Enchanted, fascinated, and amazed, we gather at the edge of the caldera in Santa Winery to toast our trip to Greece, this unique island, and to say farewell to the sun slipping into the depths of the sunken volcano.